It's Wednesday, September 17th, and it is a new day in America. It's a new day in the world. Hello, this is Michael Burns. You are watching the Burns Notice stream, streaming live from the YouTube channel Michael Burns. You can see it after the fact on the YouTube channel Sideburns, or sign up for the free Patreon and watch it whenever you want. And today, we're here to heal America. I think that a lot has happened in this country and that those things have had a ripple effect throughout the world. And I think it is now clear that I am the man to fix it. I am here to make sense of it all. I am here to put it all together. I'm here to create a human community where we can all get along. That's what I'm here for, guys. That's what I'm here for. What's up to everyone in the chat? Nice to see everyone. Shout out to Friendly Dude X's favorite bald professor. Shout out to that. Lots to talk about today. You know, last week was a weird stream. If you were here for it, thanks for being here. But on last week's stream, I started, and I'm pretty sure it was Sean in the chat who was like, Charlie Kirk just got shot. And I was like, oh no, because I didn't want to say anything dumb. I didn't want to know too much about it. And then throughout the course of last week's stream, as I was trying to kind of just keep it together and talk about stuff, then I saw messages and people were like, oh, he is dead now. And I knew as that was happening, it was going to be a big thing. And the advice I gave everyone was to not say anything too crazy in public. And, since then it's gotten pretty wild, guys. It's gotten pretty wild, people are losing jobs in America people are losing their jobs in America for expressing opinions about stuff that has happened in the world. People are also losing their jobs in America for quoting things said by a person who we are supposed to be memorializing right now. A Washington Post reporter in particular was fired. Oh, no, I think an editorial writer, opinion columnist at the Washington Post was fired for reposting a thing that Charlie Kirk said. Someone said they'll ask my question when they get past my opening statement. This whole show is one big opening statement, but sure. But yeah, I would say that we're witnessing, and I'm not trying to be too hyperbolic here, we're like witnessing the collapse of some stuff. Things have been collapsing, and I think we're at least witnessing the collapse of a certain type of ideological coherence on a side of the convo. So we're going to talk about it today. And what I want to do today is not, like Sean pointed out in the chat earlier, this isn't a news show. We're not doing breaking news. I'm not a journalist. Although, thank you, Natural Phenomenon. I appreciate it. Although I was the culture editor of my high school newspaper. Shout out Drift King 305. Good to see you, bud. But yeah, I was the culture editor of my high school newspaper. Kind of got radicalized because my journalism teacher in high school, I think her name was Miss Jepson, Deborah Jepson, I think, was like a aged hippie stoner type who was cool. And she believed that journalism was a mechanism of seeking out truth and speaking truth to power. And she got me in trouble because on 9/11, 2001, I was sent out to go interview some teachers about what had happened on 9/11. So I talked to like my AP history teacher. She was really cool. She looked like Elton John, but she was really cool. And then the principal got really mad at me. And I was like, I'm just out here trying to do the work of truth, trying to do the work of journalism, But I basically say a lot of the dialogue that's taken place in the media this week in Estados Unidos, Alemania, Ta-Nehisi, what do they call America in other places? I don't know. Is been bad and incoherent and not good. And I want to try to make it more gooder. We're going to try to make it more gooder. Shout out to everyone who, and I do think this relates. It's also self-promotional, but it relates. Shout out to everyone who checked out my newest video. The title ended up being Empathy and Existentialism. It's kind of about, it's not about what happened last week because I didn't know, although I do talk about Charlie Kirk in the video. And after stream last week, I filmed a little thing on my phone that was like, hey, we finished this video and I talked about Charlie Kirk in it, but I filmed it before I knew what was going to have happened. But then I kept it in and no one seemed to be too mad at it. But shout out if you checked out the video. It's sort of about trying to get at the sense of why the political discourse feels weird right now, why it feels like there's a lack of an ability to, I guess, speak to the ethical situation with any urgency or moral clarity. Shout out Miss Rachel, who I talk about in the video. And shout out to everyone who checked out stuff from last week's stream. You know, the videos over on Sideburns from last week's stream, a lot of people watch those, which is cool. That's cool. I really like that. I really like that, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you all. One fun thing relative to the beginning of the show is I'm currently drinking a cup of main title theme. Oh, you see there's jam on the beans. This is main title theme. It's a coffee from Yes Please. I'm drinking it right now. No spiders in it. No spiders in it. But if you want to try Yes Please coffee, which I honestly think you should because it's the best coffee that I have ever had that was been sent to my home. And I've had some coffee sent to my home. It's the best coffee I've had sent to my home. You can go to their website. It's just yesplease.coffee. And then if you order and then you use the code Burns Beans, you're going to get 20% off. So think about doing that if you want, if that's a thing that you are into. One thing that did happen is I mispronounced an Irish name in my last video, and I have been told now that any claim I have on any type of Irish ancestry has been denied. They've now changed my ancestry to English, to monarchical English, because I mispronounced an Irish name in the last video. But I mispronounced something in every video because I'm like kind of a dumb guy. But you know, it hurts when I mispronounce something that's Irish. Let's start. Let's get, let's start me up. Let's start up the show. Let's get things cooking. 1 second. Let's start pre Kirk. Let's not go right into the Kirk stuff. I want to go into something that I find a little bit more positive to get started. Let's move some stuff around. No, make me big. Make me big. Okay. Constantly working on the screen to make everything not look like shit. It's a thing. Okay. So some polling. This is not a political news show, but we like polls, we like data. New article in Politico. Poll: capitalism is out and socialism is in. Here's why I want to talk about this. Because I think personally, this is just my opinion, that a lot of what's happening right now and a lot of what's happening in general, I agree with Tyler Schmidt. Lick the stream, please. A lot of what's happening in general right now, I think, is indicative of the failure of liberalism as a coherent political and social framework. I think on both sides of dominant American political life, and of course, both, for the most part, let's paint with some broad brushstrokes here. Most Democrats in America, most Republicans in America are aligned in some type of general allegiance to the neoliberal economic, political, and even cultural project. You have some people on the right who have veered more into a authoritarianism that I think verges outside the bounds of neoliberalism. You have some folks on the liberal side who I think lean a little more towards socialism and critiques neoliberalism, which is great. But I think that right now what we're really seeing, and one place we're seeing this for sure, is in the inability of the American mainstream left or like liberal left ecosystem to respond to anything happening on the right. We're going to talk about this more later in the show, but we've seen this week with some of the reactions to the killing of Charlie Kirk, where liberal leaders and darlings quickly fell in line rather than upset boys on the internet. But that's why I wanted to look at this, because we need to find some things to be hopeful about. So this is in Politico. I think this is from today. It's not from today. It's from 2 days ago. It's from 2 days ago. And by the time you watch this, who knows when it'll be. But capitalism's out and socialism is in. Whoa. The socialist brand is on the rise, according to recent polling, fueling the left flank of the Democratic Party to argue its ideology is becoming more mainstream. Shortly after Gallup released data showing Democrats and independents are cooling towards capitalism, a progressive organization is out with a polling finding that more than half of likely Democratic voters prefer socialist-aligned figures like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Zohran Mamdani to establishment politicians like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and Nancy Pelosi. I think, to my brain at least, you can let me know if your brain is different here, this is relatively simple, because there's been enough time now where I think people have seen that the project of folks like Schumer, Jeffries, and Pelosi hasn't worked. It hasn't gone well. Things are not going great. Not only are things not going great in a baseline sense, they've been unable to articulate a clear vision of political and cultural opposition to what's been going on the authoritarian right. I think that folks like Sanders, Cortez, and Mamdani have recently been much more able and much more effective at articulating a counter vision for what society can look like. And I think a lot of the, more mainstream liberal discussion and the mainstream liberal imagination of what that counter narrative looks like, we can see this in the Harris campaign, are things like, we're going to build the most deadly military killing machine in the world. And also, we want you to use whatever pronouns you want. To be clear, it is good to create a world that is safe and egalitarian for people, regardless of gender, sexual identification. That's all good. But what they've basically been doing is saying, we're going to maintain an almost Reagan era economic war machine, but we are going to then have the cultural politics of the show Modern Family or something. And that's our vision for the future. In opposition to that, you have more socialist-leaning politicians in America articulating a vision where we're not like a massive war machine that's forever going to war, where we can just admit it's insane and dumb that we have so many billionaires and those billionaires have so much power, where we can critique the dominance of Silicon Valley in our political and military system, where we can acknowledge that housing should be a human right, that healthcare should be a human right, that education should be a human right. And for me, at least, and it seems, at least according to the results of this poll and some other things I've read recently, that is a more compelling narrative in general for what people want their future to be like. I think people are getting burned out on the kind of culture war side of things. This is a thing that happened this weekend during some NFL football games, is they showed tributes to Charlie Kirk during football games. And at one of those games, New Orleans Saints game, a home game, people booed. And of course, it's easy to say like, oh, well, all the radical leftist, like all the radical leftist Saints fans. If there's any Saints fans, shout it out. But it feels much more like what happened in that game wasn't people being radical leftists, was people being like, can't we just like not have everything be culture war? Can't I just go out on a Sunday in New Orleans and get day blasted and watch my football team inside of a dome? Can I just do that without everything having to be a part of this weird culture war structure? Why does every show have to like somehow play in to my political identity? Why does every single thing and every part of life have to be like that? So this article goes on to say that Democratic voters also viewed elected officials who describe themselves as Democratic Socialists about as positively as those who identify as Democrats. and they prefer democratic socialism to capitalism when written definitions of each are read aloud to them. That's a very funny polling. Like, I'm going to read you 2 definitions. But I will say, as someone that used to teach at colleges, at multiple colleges, if you ever watch one of these and you're one of my ex-students, shout out to you. I had great students. I miss that part of things. But I would often find that you would have students, especially at some of the, let's say, like nicer colleges I taught at, that came from probably conservative families and things of that nature, who would have a proclivity towards neoliberalism or conservative politics simply because that's what they grew up in. I'll never forget the first semester I taught at a school that I taught at. I won't say too much because I don't want to accidentally dox a really nice person. But I had a student who I liked, and I remember she like opened her laptop and there was a Mitt Romney sticker on there. And I was like, oh, but I was like, you're 18 years old, whatever. And then 2 years later, I had this student in another class. We were reading, communist French philosopher Alain Badiou, and she did some amazing work. It was basically like critiquing the ideological structures of capitalism. And I bring that example up to say that I would find that when I taught, when you detached actual understandings of political, philosophical, ideas from the branding, people would often fuck with them. I even think about like, and I wish I could remember exactly what I did, but there's an exercise I did once where I'd put a thing from Jesus and a thing from Marx on a slide and be like, who said what? And, often students who might self-identify as conservatives or liberals or moderates, when you see the language of Marx next to the language of Christ, they would be like, oh, this sounds kind of legit. So I think something good is happening when we are able to articulate what a political alternative is to what's happening right now in a way that appeals to people. I think that at times there can be a temptation to say, oh, we need our Joe Rogan of the left, and like they have all the money and we don't have the money, and it's like, also just like articulate a vision of things that makes sense to people. What the mainstream of the party wants is both democratic socialism as a value system and democratic socialist politicians, says Gabe Tobias, executive director of the Democratic Socialist of America Fund, a political nonprofit organization. I've heard of DSA. I'm aware of them. I know the cut of their jib. Though Democratic voters are warming to socialism, the ideology is toxic to most Republicans and many independents. Even within the Democratic Party, some voters are skeptical about the electability of Democratic socialists in swing areas, a reality Sanders faced during his 2 unsuccessful presidential runs. Democrats find themselves in turmoil after the national drubbing. Let's bring back the word drubbing they took last year, and have been tussling for months over how to rebuild their party. Try to use the word drubbing in a sentence in social conversation this week and let me know how it goes. You could send those to me and I can look at, the examples on the show next week. Progressives and moderates have sought to shape the debate through polling, memos, and in-person gatherings as they bicker over the path out of the wilderness. Again, not to be too Homery here, not Homer Simpson, like Homery, but someone said, am I tweaking or did I just see my coworker in here? In the chat or on the screen? Am I your coworker? Do we work together? I don't know. And now I just totally forgot what I was going to say. If you do a drinking game where you drink every time ADHD happens aggressively, then you can do that right now. I got distracted by drubbing, then I got distracted by the thing that I said in the comments. I'll just keep reading this article. We'll see if it comes back. 53% of Democratic voters said they preferred politicians described as similar to Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, Mamdani, while 33% favored those to Schumer, Jeffries, Pelosi. 14% didn't choose. The results help explain why socialists and progressives have found success in blue seats in cities, but have struggled to appeal to swing states and voters, to swing voters in battleground areas. And it says in the poll, Democratic socialists were defined as believing that the government should take a more active role to improve American lives. They generally support higher taxes on corporations and high-income earners, support regulation that protects workers and consumers, and want more public ownership of key industries like housing and healthcare and utilities. I think that's a good description. And often when you read descriptions of what socialism, communism, democratic socialism are, the people that talk most about this stuff are weird people on the right. The people that are obsessed with talking about Marxism and neo-Marxism and postmodern Marxism are these weird right-wing people who don't know what they're talking about, and they know they don't know what they know what they're talking about, right? But they know that you don't know that they don't know what they're talking about. You feel me? And because of that, they just say stuff. And what another thing they know is that people on the left liberal end of the American mainstream political discourse and the political discourse and politicians themselves are so afraid of them or afraid of attack from the right or especially the right wing media infrastructure that they just ignore talking about these things altogether. So when right wing people say crazy things about what democratic socialists mean, it's not like Rachel Maddow or whoever is going to say, oh, actually, this is what that means. You know, it's not like Rachel Maddow has a PhD in political science from Oxford University and should know better. Oh, she does? Breaking news. Okay. Um, but no one's giving that counter narrative. And I'm sure many of you have found this. I found this in my own life that often if I talk to people, whether at a tavern, a pub, an ale house, things of that nature, or a family member at a wedding or something, when you describe things like this, you know, the government taking a more active role to improve Americans' lives, higher taxes on corporations and high income earners, regulations to protect workers and consumers, public ownership, people are pretty into this sort of stuff, you know? We've got to lean into that. The survey described capitalists as believing that the private sector is best equipped to make improvements in Americans' lives. They generally support lower taxes, oppose government regulations of business, and want the private sector to own key industries like housing, healthcare, and utilities. You know what the problem for capitalism is? These days, this is just one way I could put it. We were really loving capitalism when we had the coolest consumer goods, when we had all the nicest stuff and we felt like we had access to the nicest stuff and we could afford to do all the stuff. We were loving capitalism. What's happening now is American consumers don't have the nicest stuff anymore. We don't have access to some of the nicest stuff. We can't afford other things that we grew up thinking of as almost our birthright if we pass the right test to enter the middle class. Things like going to concerts and movies and going out to dinner and, you know, buying new technological devices and cool shoes and shit. All of it's getting way more expensive and untenable for normal people. So I think we are kind of realizing that the consumerist fantasy offered to us isn't what we thought it was. You know, shout out the concept of enshittification. But things don't work good no more. And we don't have the good things no more. I just want to say special shout out to Vorpal Snicker Snack. Thank you so much. I'm glad I didn't quit making videos as well. I realized I really liked doing it. I didn't know that I liked doing it until I lost my job doing it and started doing it on my own. It's one of those things where like you're with someone and you don't appreciate them and then they leave you for their tennis instructor and then you realize you love them. But yeah, Tonks, shout out. That's the person who makes this coffee, friends. Again, yes, please, coffee. You know it. You love it. Burns Beans. It truly is the best. Truly is the best. I'm not going to shit on anyone else, guys, but you know it and I know it. I canceled another coffee subscription that I've been with for years because I love these guys so much. But like they make electric vehicles in China that are better than what we have and more affordable. Public transportation across the world is better than what we have. The internet is faster in most places. Like we're not the best country anymore. Now I'm not trying to do something where I say that like everything we want should be exactly like China or something like that. But I think people are realizing that. And when you do, you start to look around and be like, wait a second. I mean, to use the relationship analogy again, it'd be like if you were in one relationship, like you started dating your high school sweetheart or something and you never dated anyone else and you go to college, you get a little bit older and you start observing the relationships that other people have and you're like, whoa, that relationship seems a lot more loving and kind and blah, blah. Why don't I have that? And you're like, oh, because there's other ways to do it. And one of the whole deals of American political ideology is telling us, shout to Montel Jordan, this is how we do it. Not another way, just this. This is how we do it. And of course, Luke Phillips notes in the chat that people don't have to get shot in school. That's a pretty big thing. That's a pretty big deal that we don't have to do that. That's pretty great. That's pretty great to not have to do that all the time. It's all about treats. And I think people are starting to realize that the guys who told us, listen to us and we'll give you treats, They're not giving us treats anymore. And another difference, and I think I want to say my buddy Dave Meason, who helps work on this channel, made this point the other day. There used to be an old type. God, it was either Dave Meason or my friend Matthew Telly. I hate that I got them confused, but they're both incredible people. Matthew Telly is one of the musicians who made the intro music for this show, by the way. So shout out to him. But someone made the point that old school rich guys understood that they had to give us enough treats. You know, like classic neoliberals, 80s, 90s rich guys, they got it. That for them to maintain power, they had to give us enough treats so that we would give some type of passive permission to them. The problem with new rich guys is they don't give a fuck. They want computer to do everything. So new rich guys don't give us treats anymore. You know, the new rich guys don't want us to have our little things. They don't give us like enough to just kind of passively sit with it. So we're starting to react against the new rich guys. To use an example here, I don't like anyone I'm about to say, but think about the difference in public perception of a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates versus an Alex Karp or an Elon Musk or a Peter Thiel. You know, in general, when I was growing up, we looked at people like Steve Jobs. They made 2 movies about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Oh, they're like rich guys, but they're like good rich guys, you know? I'm not saying they are. But they created a perception and gave us enough treats to where we were like, oh yeah, we'll make movies about, we like these guys. They're interesting. We look up to them. We let them have opinions on everything. Now you have, again, the Peter Thiels, the Alex Karps, the Jeff Bezoses, the Elon Musks, who look like goddamn psychopaths and don't want us to have any sort of treats. After any description, so yeah, 47% of likely Democratic voters said democratic socialism comes closest to their viewpoint. Yeah, because it makes, I mean, people love to talk about common sense, but it makes common sense. Again, this comes from Politico. This article by Holly Otterbein. That's a cool name, Holly Otter. I would call her Holly Otti if I was friends with that person. And there's a cool picture, you know, of AOC. Looks like a kind of J. Crew type outfit with her uncle. His name is Bernard Sanders. But again, I think this is potentially hopeful for us because it does show that if we simply articulate a vision for the future that both offers people a better life and a more sustainable future, and also provides a clear counter critique and counter narrative towards contemporary right authoritarianism, we have a shot here. Now, speaking of contemporary right authoritarianism, let's talk about Charlie Kirk. Now, Charlie Kirk, the founder and host person of Turning Point USA, was shot last week during the stream. Not that the stream had anything to do with it. And it's been, I would say, the biggest talking point in American political discourse and global political discourse for the past week. And some folks like Ezra Klein have written columns saying that, you know, Charlie Kirk did it the right way. Ezra Klein, a liberal primarily known as the father of the abundance movement. I have a video on that if you want to check it out. But, you know, Ezra Klein made the point that Charlie Kirk was doing things the right way. He was creating the conditions of debate. Isn't that what we want? You know, shouldn't we want more Charlie Kirk? Shouldn't we want more people to go to college campuses and look an eager 19-year-old in the eyes and say, you're gay, so you're going to hell, prove me wrong? Isn't that what intellectual honesty is about? Something similar from, you know, liberal governor, future presidential aspirational superstar Gavin Newsom. If Jason Bateman was on the West Coast, Jason Bateman, I didn't mean to say that. Patrick Bateman, Jason Bateman, actor, Patrick Bateman, fictional character, not good guy. But, you know, Gavin Newsom, who had Charlie Kirk on his podcast, like, oh, my kid loves Charlie Kirk. He put out a whole statement about how Charlie was this good guy, all this sort of stuff. And I think it led me to reconsider some of the things that I think I was saying about Charlie and the perspective I had of him. So a thing that I challenged myself to do this week was step back and step outside of my own ideological bubble and ask myself, like, was I wrong? Was he doing something a lot more useful than I realized? Was I just being hyperbolic and listening to other leftists online and stuff like that? And, I found some stuff that helped me kind of reconsider this. So I wanted to actually share a clip with you because I don't know, I want to do better. I think we should all want to do better. So here's a clip of Charlie Kirk speaking. And I think if you're one of those people who said stuff about him online, or you're someone who's been negative, like, just know, like, this is a person, and we need to remember that, like, the people are complex and they're multifaceted. And I mean,
so, it's funny. I used to say that, hey, if you as a gay person would go to Gaza, they'd throw you off of tall buildings, right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't.
The joke is that they would used to throw a gay person off a building, which is funny. That's, I mean, in itself, on its own right. I mean, I'm in Chuckle City, USA. But then he adds to it by pointing out that they can't throw anyone off buildings anymore because they've been devastated in what the UN has recently described, and as Bernie Sanders described today, as a genocide. I want to show you the best moment of this. Watch the little, like, look he does after he makes the joke to be like, did I do it?
Right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't.
And then people cheer because this is what the people want. This is what the people want. And I'll be clear too, because I see someone saying this in the chat. I don't think, and I'm saying this very genuinely, if you're looking for me to say something really crazy, I don't think anyone deserves to get shot like that. I don't think it's, like, cool. I'm not going to be some hyperbolic person and say that. So let's just, like, say that at the outset. I said it last week and I say it this week. I would say the problem is in the American political discourse that we have to be able to hold both things true. We can acknowledge that sort of, if we want to call it political violence, we'll call it political violence, is bad and not good. And we also need to acknowledge that what people say is who they are. You know what I mean? Like, our actions and our words are external exhibitions of our character as humans. But maybe he gets it. Maybe he makes this better. Maybe he makes this better because he was a nice guy.
When you mess with the bull, you get the horns.
Is that too soon? I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
Wait, what? Sorry, my thing went out. I thought he said, what?
Sorry, maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
So that's the sort of, wait, no, he didn't. I think I'm having interference from something else because this guy valued political debate and diversity and
stupid Muslims.
Not good. It's not good.
I like that.
Where was that? So
I'm sure most people in that room are self-identifying evangelical Christians. Now, again, the reason we are watching a clip like that right now is in no way, shape, or form to say that being openly racist, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Black, all these things, we're not saying that those things mean that you should die. They do not. We're simply saying that those are positions that this person openly espoused. And I think that the sort of Ezra Klein and Gavin Newsom takes on this, that this sort of debate is valuable for our democratic future, is sorely misguided. I'll tell you why. When one debates a topic, there's a level in which you are giving some tacit affirmation that there is a level of intellectual or political legitimacy to the things being debated. If someone wanted to debate me and they said, let's debate what is a better food to have at a baseball game, a chicken tender basket or a hot dog, I would enter that debate. The reason I would enter it is I think there are potentially valid reasons why both a hot dog or a chicken tender basket could be the ideal snack to have at a baseball game. You can have that debate in the comments if you want. Now, if you said to me, okay, let's have another debate. Is the better snack to have at a baseball game a hot dog or an ice cream cone full of glass and dried blood? Well, I don't need to have that debate because one of those things is not a valid snack. It's not a thing that would be healthy or good or useful to snack on as a human. Imagine if I was a debate guy, and imagine if you were people that supported my work and you saw me go debate someone and the topic of debate was like, do Black people deserve equal rights? I would hope that you would be pretty pissed. And I would hope you'd be pretty pissed because you would be saying, why would Michael even entertain that proposition? Why would that person spend a second of their life taking seriously the idea that the idea of racial inequality is even on the table? I think we'd say the same thing for religious rights, gay rights, all these sorts of things. And, I think that's a thing we have to keep in mind about this. It is not that this is an attack or was an attack on debate at all. People are mad at this person, and people disliked this person's work, not because they liked to debate. It's because they espoused hateful rhetoric. I mean, this is someone who literally said Black women's brains are structured differently, so they can't do certain jobs. It's like a thing this person said. Person called MLK a scumbag and George Floyd a thug. And, gosh, hold on. There was a little quote I had earlier, just because there's so much good stuff that this gentleman has said. Let me find this one. Here we go. Oops, wrong one. Thank you for being patient with me. No, here we go. Okay. So this is a quote from Charlie Kirk. He said, Jewish donors were the number one funding mechanism of radical open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. If you have an anti-Semitism alarm in your house and you're listening to this without headphones, I'm sorry that I just made your alarm go off. Indeed, the philosophical foundation of anti-whiteness has been largely financed by Jewish donors in this country. What? What are we doing? What are we doing? Question in the chat. Someone said, where would you draw the line on what is valid? Lime green for a bathroom, even white with red dots. How far is wrong? Worth debating. We can have different principles here. Mine is the principle of egalitarianism. And I want to, Mark Wilson said this in the chat. I've heard a lot of people claim that there's a lot of missing context in these things. Do you think it's worth diving deeper? A couple of these things I have looked up, like the thing you said about Michelle Obama's brain not working. Someone posted the full context, and in my mind, it made it worse. But I don't know. Like, I'm someone who I totally understand that you could take 13 seconds of what I said and be like, oh, this person is unwell. But I don't think there's ever been something you can clip from me where you would just be like, oh, this person's a white nationalist anti-Semite. But again, like the incoherence of this, first of all, the idea that there's a group of Jewish donors who are like, we love open borders. We're very neoliberal, but we're also Marxist. Okay. And we also hate the whites. Oh, okay. Cool. Would you guys want anything else? This is a friendlies. In my mind, this group meets at friendlies. But back to the question of where we draw these sorts of lines. Like, I do think that egalitarianism is a pretty gosh darn good place to draw that line. One of my favorite philosophers, French philosopher Alain Badiou, talks about the principle of equality. Now, in a very simple mathematical sense, the principle of equality is one equals one. You know, 1 equals 1. Might sound silly, might sound basic, but the idea is every person is a person, and a trans person equals 1, and a black person equals 1, and a white person equals 1, and Kid Rock unfortunately still equals 1, and Ted Nugent equals 1. If Aaliyah was still alive, she would equal 5. Everyone else is 1. And because we're going to operate with this 1 equal 1 thing, as soon as you engage in a discourse which fundamentally assumes or tries to argue that actually some people are less than, I'm good. I got better stuff to do. There's good videos on this website. I can take a walk and try to pet a dog. I don't have a dog, but sometimes there's people let you pet their dogs. And try to take a nap. I'm not a good napper, but I could try. There's always good content to see. You could play a musical instrument. You could read a book. You could watch a movie. You know, great time to go back and watch the filmography of Paul Thomas Anderson as we all get ready for one battle after another. It's all I'm going to talk about soon. So get ready for that. I am going to have a movie show soon because that's what I'm going to talk about. But, you know, and the odd thing is that a lot of the folks that currently rampantly support someone like Charlie Kirk, more generally, contemporary white Christian nationalism, more generally, are Christians, identify with Christianity. And I think that you can argue that there are good arguments that if you are someone who believes in some level of ethical truth in the Torah and the New Testament, that it's pretty easy to arrive at a position of equality. It's pretty easy to arrive at a position where, especially in a more Christian sense, where what love means is an outpouring of oneself, is a self-sacrificial love, is a prioritizing of the other, is a sharing of communal resources with each other, of giving my body, giving my blood, whatever. I'm going to sound like I'm, a seminary dropout now or something. But I think that that's a starting point, and it's dangerous when we don't have that starting point. It's dangerous when we don't have some baseline principle. And this is what confuses me, is I think Christianity should be something that accomplishes that. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all the, Abrahamic faiths have a lot of this in them. We don't need to reach for it. When you look at where, the systems in which that principle of identity or principle of equality starts to break down, it's like, under monarchy, that's not good. We don't like that. Under really rampant brutalist capitalism, well, it kind of goes through there, but that's kind of where we're at with some of that. Now, one of the things that's happened in the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing is we're now meant to believe, a couple of things, right? The first thing that happened is we were told that he was killed by left-wing radicals. Immediately. So Charlie Kirk dies. Immediately we hear this is the radical left. There's a war on the left. Trump says we got to go to war on the left. J.D. Vance, who hosted Charlie Kirk's show this week, we really got to step back and look at that too. The sitting vice president had time to host a streaming show. Let me know in the comments if I die who you think should host this show in my wake. And I just want to see, Brooks points out, just discovered Altaze, thoughts on his work. Altaze is someone who's really important for a lot of my favorite philosophers. I kind of like a genetic theory or a sort of like genealogy theory of study. So if I find out that someone I like, I'm like this with music too. If I like a guitar player and it's like, oh, they were really influenced by Albert King, well, I want to go listen to Albert King. A lot of the French dudes that I like, people like Alain Badiou, Jacques Rancière, Etienne Balibar, were students of or in the orbit of Althusser. I don't ultimately vibe with Althusser's anti-humanism, but I think he's important and worth reading. Happy to talk about him more in the future. Sorry. But in the wake of all this, the narrative is created that the radical left did this. The left is doing this. All the left. This is all left. This is all the left. The left is doing this. And we get stuff like this. This is my girl Pam Bondi. And she has some stuff to tell us.
Yes, who killed Charlie? Left-wing radicals. And
so this is just a thing she said. Like, who knows anything? We still don't really know anything about the guy. Here's my take on it. Again, I'm not a journalist, although again, I was the culture editor of my high school newspaper, so maybe I am a journalist. We need to stop doing this thing where anytime someone gets shot, we look for coherent ideology. There's not one thing I've seen or read about the dude that did this that would make it clear that he was operating with any semblance of a clear political ideology or motive. There's just none of that there.
And they will be held accountable. So
they will be held accountable? Who? I'll tell you what they're thinking of here. They're just thinking of more ways to demonize and criminalize people that identify as at all left or critical of their administration the same way. And they tested a lot of the shit on college students over the past year when the college students were protesting things. Now even the UN is calling it genocide. They used that as a little test laboratory to figure out how do we get these guys. And now they're going to start rolling it out mainstream.
Well, anyone in this country who commits a violent crime against anyone, and the death penalty, thanks to Donald Trump, is on the table again.
Yay, the death penalty is on the table again because we hate violence, guys. If there's one thing we hate, it's violence. Well, if there's one thing we hate, it's violence, except for if it's the death penalty. We love violence then. We love that. MMA is pretty sick, though. We're going to do some MMA on the White House lawn, so that's sick. Obviously, football, that doesn't count. That's the sort of violence that we like. And there's all those dead kids overseas, but that doesn't count as political violence. That's not political violence. Let me explain to you why what's happening in Gaza is not political violence. That's different because and also when police in America continue to get away with killing Black people, it's not political. What political violence is the thing that happens where someone I like, something bad happens to them, and then we kill everyone who disagrees with me. Okay, so that's where we're at, and this narrative has emerged that left-wing political violence is at the heart of all these things. And I'm going to shout out Eddie right here. Eddie, who I've had a tab open for a week now, or more than a week, responding to Eddie about helping me work on merch that I just haven't sent because I keep looking for other designs, and I have ADHD the way that I almost used an analogy that's really offensive, so I'm just not going to use it. I'm going to stop there. You can finish it if you want. If you in the chat, if you want to say Michael has ADHD like blank has blank, you can do that, and that's on you because free speech. But Eddie brings up the point, right-wing political violence, and I mean, right here from Time Magazine, source the Cato Institute, ideology of political murders. So those are just numbers. Those are numbers you can look at there that show you that there's not a lot of political violence on the left. An example of something else. I'll pull this up. I just want to make sure the video on this website doesn't start playing. There's going to be some sort of advertisement there. It is what it is. Let's see. DOJ quietly removed studies showing that right-wing attacks outpace those by the left. The Justice Department quietly removed from its website a study showing far-right extremists were responsible for the bulk of ideologically motivated deaths, a move that comes as the GOP seeks to back claims from President Trump that the radical left poses a greater danger than the right wing. So there's no data or examples that are out here showing us that the left wing is responsible for political violence, but they're just going to say that, and they're going to use it to do stuff. This is, and again, I don't have all these clips pulled up because I'm a one-man operation. I'm not a one-man operation. The stream I do by myself. Henry helps with the edits after the fact. But I'm sure some of you saw this. Trump was asked about his friend Charlie Kirk, and his response was, "We're building a beautiful ballroom. It's going to be like nothing else you've ever seen before." so much of the discourse in the early days was like, oh, the person who did this has to be trans. They got to be trans. They have to be trans. Like, what? Why do they have to be trans? Why does it have to be a trans person? That's why it was, what are we doing here? I didn't mean to say, what are we doing here when I put that up, but that shows you even more why we got to get that shirt made. And then of course the firings, that part definitely freaks me out. The way that people are getting fired and losing their jobs because of their responses to something like this, which is then just being utilized. This is from The Atlantic to attack. This is our girl Pam Bondi again. There's her with the flag. There's her with the flag. Attorney General, that's the general attorney. That's like the Army Lieutenant Chief of Attorneys. America's highest ranking law enforcement official declared in an interview posted to YouTube that federal law enforcement will go after Americans for hate speech. There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. In fact, there's no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. They can just say whatever they want. They can just say whatever they want. Ironically, again, you can trust me on this or you can not trust me on it. I'm cool with you either way. This is something that Charlie Kirk himself has explicitly argued against. So there you go. A post on X, where politics happens. Bondi tried to qualify her comments, but the fact that the Attorney General of the United States publicly misrepresented long-standing American speech laws is ominous, especially in the context of threat made by other Trump administration officials, their allies, and President Donald Trump to target left-wing organizations the administration says promotes violence. I mean, stuff's been happening. Journalists are losing jobs. People that just work random jobs are losing jobs. There was a student, was it Texas Tech? I might get it wrong. One of the Texas colleges who walked by a vigil for Charlie Kirk and said something like, shut up, they got your boy, eat shit, or something like that. I don't know. It was something like that. And she got arrested because she touched someone's hat. Also, it's the toughest guys in the world are the ones who will call you for assault if you touch their hat. I mean, if you touch my hat, I'll end you, but still. So yeah, Trump has said repeatedly they're going to target left-wing organizations that promote violence. I don't know what left-wing organizations they're talking about. The only left-wing organization that I've been an active part of in America, I guess, is the Democratic Socialists of America. And it's very unviolent. I think it could be more violent. There should be more violence at DSA meetings. They're very polite, way too much conversation. Let's do some fisticuffs. Trump responded. This was to comments about the Pam Bondi's comments. She'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. So he is just saying straight up there, my attorney general is creating new laws around hate speech that mean that when you say bad stuff about me, it is called hate. Thanks for being here, by the way. This is the most people that have ever watched a stream on this channel. So thank you so much. Like the stream if you have not. It helps when you do. Remember that all these videos get posted later over on the Sideburns channel. And if you can't be here live and you want the full thing with no ads, consider signing up for my free Patreon, because over on the free Patreon, the one perk I give you for free just because I like you so much is you get links to all that. I forgot to post this on Patreon today. Wow, I'm a piece of shit. But people are still here watching it, so that's great too. But that's scary. That's a scary precedent. And she, Bondi issued her warning on the Katie Miller podcast to Stephen Miller's wife. Stephen Miller's a guy who's just kind of like a Nazi. But yeah, they're coming at free speech pretty hard. They're trying to make more distinctions on this now. But the weirdest thing about all of this is that these are the people whose whole thing is that cancel culture is bad and woke culture is bad, and you should get to say whatever you want. And if I want to go on my stream and say the N-word or whatever, I can do it. Natural Phenomena asked if I can respond to their question. I'm going to scroll back and see if I could find it. It's hard to keep track of sometimes because it's just me and it's just me talking. So you might have to post it again in a bit because I'm scrolling back and I'm not seeing it. I do see a question I missed here. Do you think the admin is taking advantage of the confusion to amplify their nefarious acts without people caring? It's been hard not to focus on. Yes. I mean, I definitely think they are. this is an opportunity for this administration to make themselves victims. And this is the move of the contemporary American authoritarian conservative movement. It's a trick that they learned from their friends in the evangelical movement to have power, but to paint yourself as martyrs, to create the sense that you, in fact, are the ones under attack. So the narrative that the government wants to create right now is, of course, that they are the people trying to hold on to freedom in the American way, and natural phenomena. Ask your question again. They're the ones who are representing freedom in the American way, and they're being attacked by this radical left that hates freedom. I see someone in the chat comparing it to Naomi Klein's shock doctrine. Okay, so it's and I see natural phenomena. Your question is about abundance. Let me get to this later, just because I'm kind of in the middle of this thing right now. But I'm happy to talk about that a little more later. But yeah, it's a bunch of persecution complex stuff is what's happening. It's creating a sense of victimization that then can justify attacking one's enemies, because it doesn't matter who killed Charlie Kirk or why. And by that, I mean, it doesn't matter to the administration. It doesn't matter to the right-wing culture warriors. This is an excuse for them to project things onto a non-existent imagined enemy and use that to do bad stuff. It's not something that I'm really stoked about. I imagine it's something that most of you are not really stoked about. But I'll show you something that's scary, and then we'll move on a little bit. But I mean, let's see how the weird evangelical Christians are responding. I'm sure it's normal.
Just when they said we were too far gone, God raised up an army, and look what the Lord has done. The White House, Capitol Hill, in the name of Jesus, California, New York, Nebraska, in the name of Jesus. Someone give God praise. Bring that flag. Bring me that flag. Bring me that flag. Bring that flag.
Is he gonna fuck
Bring
the
that
flag?
flag. Run, skip, hop, jump. Just when they said it was over, not on our watch, not for much. I'm snatching it from the fire, and I say America will have revival again. But it's not just the White House. It's not just the Senate. It's not just the House of Representatives. But we're snatching every judicial appointment. We're snatching every court. We're snatching every state legislator, every governor of the land, every religious institution, every educational institution. We take it by force in the name of Jesus. Every religious institution, every educational institution, we take it by force. 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 We take it by force in the name of Jesus, and we eat it to verdict tonight. The devil thought he had it, but we've snatched it out of the fire.
So things are going well in the Christian world right now. The response to everything happening is that we're gonna snatch everything. We're gonna take an entire country by force. And as someone who used to be more of a self-identifying Christian, as someone who studied the Bible in college, as someone that studied theology at the graduate level, I can guarantee you everything you just said is in the Bible. Jesus says repeatedly, the point of faith is to snatch political power by force. The point of being a Christian is to be the strongest motherfucker in the room and to fuck shit up and to do what you want. It's all over the Bible. But that's what's happening. And again, anyone, I know some people who watch the show and who hang out here are people who identify as religious. Shout out to you. But like, that that's not what any of it means. That that's not at the core of any mainstream religious tradition. Maybe Scientology, I don't know. Shout out to them. Tom Cruise, I see you. But we just ask ourselves, like, what is this really about? And we know what it's really about, but we're not supposed to say it. We're not supposed to say it, but it's not great. I want to look at a couple of the reactions to what had happened last week and consider them at a bit more length. And what I particularly want to do is, talk about the responses and the reactions to Charlie Kirk's death in the media, and maybe just see what's going on. But just a reminder, shout out to all of you for being here. If you like coffee, Yes Please Coffee, They Them Boys, We Them Boys, They Them Boys. It's not in focus right now. This is the main title theme. I like one sip left. It's good. Coffee's good if even when it starts to cool off, it still tastes delicious. But if you go to Yes Please, remember to use the code Burns Beans. Don't burn your beans. They don't burn your beans. But if you get Burns Beans, you get like 15 or 20% off your coffee. They don't pay me to say that. They're just the homies. And we like to look out for people. Like the stream. If you're here, it means a lot when you do. And of course, check out the Patreon if you want. Check out the main channel, all that sort of stuff. Because we love it when you do that. And let me just again shoot you guys the link to Yes Please. Actually, I'll just show you this. Look, I'm gonna show you guys a pretty ass website. I know if there's one thing that y'all love, you love a pretty ass website. You freaks. Look at that. Look at that pretty ass website. Look at that graphic design. Look at those colors. Look at that. And you could just go to that website. You could go there yourself on your web browser. You could support a company that's just a small group of people doing one thing really well. You could do that. Tyler said, how did the Yes Please relationship start? I liked their coffee and then I shot them an email and then someone got back and then me and Tony got coffee once and talked about it more. And we should meet up again and do some stuff soon. But it's as simple as that. Nothing crazy here. I just like them. I like their coffee. And I think there's so many like YouTube marketing type things and companies that work with people that are trash. And I just think it's cool that they make something good that we can feel good about. So, let's get back into some of the stuff. Here's an article from Elizabeth Spears. I want to look at this because it's one of the first pieces I saw last week, and I'll give you the syllabus for the rest of the day. I want to look at this Elizabeth Spears piece. I want to look at the Ta-Nehisi Coates piece. I would say the Ta-Nehisi Coates thing is the main thing I want to talk about today. And then at the end of the show, Michael Luxembourg is going to come on and say some stuff to us and hopefully not get the channel canceled. But this is by Elizabeth Spears over at The Nation. I will put a link in the chat right now if you want to check this out. We snatched it from that guy really scares me. Charlie Kirk's legacy deserves no mourning. This came out on September 12th. People were mad at this headline when it came out. It says Charles James Kirk died on Wednesday from a gunshot to the neck at Utah Valley University campus event as he was trying to deflect a question about mass shootings by suggesting they were largely a function of gang violence. This is just a true thing. The dude's last words were blaming mass shootings on Black people and trans people. That's what he did. That's what he died doing. I'm not attempting to be disrespectful. I'm quite literally describing what happens. Like I knew someone once I'm about to say way more than I should. I know someone who died having sex because they did too much cocaine and they're having sex and their heart blew up. It's not disrespectful to say about that person. They died as they lived, blowing rails and getting ass. You know, that's how that person died. It's not disrespectful to that person's legacy to say it is what it is. He died with a net worth of $12 million, which he made by espousing horrific and bigoted views in the name of advancing Christian nationalism. And I think this is important. Like, let us remember, this was not a politician. This wasn't really even like an activist or an organizer. This is a human being who made a media product, and that media product left him with a net worth of $12 million. I'm just going to put this Greg Ellick thing here. I don't even know what the context is, but I love it. But the guy who died because of, yes, that is true. That is true. I'm just going to leave that up for a bit because it's very true. The foundation of his empire was the group he co-founded and led, Turning Point USA. He launched it at 18 because he received money from Tea Party member Bill Montgomery, right-wing donor Foster Freeze. Is that the owner of the Foster Freeze soft serve empire? And his own father, also a prolific right-wing donor, was an unrepentant racist, transphobe, homophobe, and misogynist who often wrapped his bigotry in Bible verses because there was no other way to pretend that it was morally correct. He had children, as do many vile people. Elizabeth Spears went pretty hard with this one. Elizabeth Spears woke up and said, my job is to write things that are meant to be reflective of the truth of reality. And even if this means a bunch of right-wingers are going to try to fuck up my whole life, I'm going to say this. I'm going to read this again. He was an unrepentant racist, transphobe, homophobe, and misogynist who often wrapped his bigotry in Bible verses. This is true. And there's evidence to back all of this up. And this is someone who sports leagues and stadiums around America held moments of silence for. This is someone who Jamie Lee Curtis cried talking about. This is someone who Ezra Klein said was a model for political discourse. This is someone who Gavin Newsom said we were going to miss, and we got to miss him, blah, blah. Like, what are we doing? It says he had children. Many Bible people do. Here's the thing, guys. People have kids. And some people who are really bad people have kids. And some people who are really good people have kids. And some people who are mid have kids. It does not make you a good or a bad person to have kids. You're a good or a bad person by being a good or a bad person. And I think we should all be able to hold these two things. I'm going to hold two things right now. Ready for this? It's going to be crazy. It is effed up that someone just got shot in front of their family and those kids don't have a dad anymore. That's effed up. Also, the person I'm referring to was an unrepentant racist, transphobe, homophobe, and misogynist who often wrapped his bigotry in Bible verses because there was no other way to pretend that was morally correct. Both of those things are true. Spears goes on to say, it is rude of me to say all this because we live in a culture where manners are often valued more than truth. Damn. That is why a slew of pundits and politicians have raced to portray Kirk's activities, which harmed many vulnerable people, in a positive light. And again, I am a white dude from the Midwest who, I guess culturally identifies with Christianity. There's not a lot that Kirk has done that's genuine, that's like attacked my identity type. I can't imagine how it feels if you are a trans person, if you are a black person, if you are a migrant, if you are a Muslim. We saw the clip earlier where he made fun of Muslims. And you see the country you live in putting flags at half mast to celebrate this person? Fuck are we doing? Let's see. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who wants to be the guy. Gavin Newsom wants to be the guy so bad. He framed Kirk's project as a healthy democratic exercise. The best way to honor Charlie's memory is to continue his work, engage with each other across ideology through spirited discourse. In a democracy, ideas are tested through words and good faith debate. He didn't do good faith debate, guys. He created social media events by going to colleges and being like, debate me. Also, I'll just say it, like, Elizabeth Spears in The Nation. Yes, that's what this article is. I'll post the link again. I'll post the link right now in the chat if you guys want to look it up. Important to support journalists who still have jobs at these times where they're firing all the journalists. If the point here was debating ideas, Charlie, you know who else is at colleges? You know who else you can find on college campuses? Academics. You can find political scientists, philosophers, historians, theologians, religious scholars, gender and queer studies scholars. You could find all of these people and you could talk to them. But what this person was interested in was having 19-year-olds wait in line to create a social media moment. That is all that this was. If he was a serious individual who cared about debate in the way that Gavin Newsom describes, well, then talk to serious people. You're 31 years. He was 31 years old. You know, and I think this is reflective of a lot of internet stuff. This isn't just a Charlie Kirk problem. It's the problem of a media ecosystem that facilitates, perpetuates, and rewards this stuff. But come on. There's no requirement to take part in this whitewashing campaign. And refusing to join in doesn't make anyone a bad person. It's a choice to write an obituary that begins, Joseph Goebbels was a gifted marketer and loving father to 6 children. That's the thing, guys. We live in this world where the reaction to this whole thing has been like, you either have to publicly say he was a really good, interesting dude, or you're evil, or you have to say, you know, you're glad he's dead. You don't. We don't have to do this. People are who they are. They say what they say. We do not get to retroactively reinterpret their work in a light that makes them look better because they're dead. It can be sad that they are dead. We can be upset that we live in a world where people are just getting shot at events like that. That's horrifying. And that sucks for everyone. That sucks for everyone in this country, that when you go to a school or a public event, you have to think to yourself, is someone going to start shooting today? That's horrifying. And nothing is cool about that. Nothing is good about it. No one deserves that. It's horrible. It's bad. It sucks. But that is one thing, and this is another thing. Many of the facile defenses of Kirk and his legacy are predicated on the idea that it's acceptable to spread hateful ideas, advocating for the persecution of perceived enemies, as long as you dress them up in a posture of debate. The man who smeared black women like Tani Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama, whom he claimed had benefited from affirmative action, saying, and this is just the author quoting the man, this is Charlie Kirk talking about a Supreme Court justice and Michelle Obama. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. It's a white podcaster who I don't think ever had a real job. In case you're going to say, but you don't have a real job. I didn't say this was a real job. Don't you speak on me. But this man said about a Supreme Court justice and Michelle Obama, you do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. Like, what would you think if you were in life and you saw a white man go up to a black woman at her job and say, actually, you don't have the brain processing power to be taken really seriously? Like, it's an insane thing to say. It's an absolutely insane thing to say. Now, Spears says it's true we cannot know what was in Charlie Kirk's heart because he was not telepathic, but we can make reasonable inferences based on the things he said and did publicly because we are also not colossally stupid. He built a large following and acquired real political power saying these things to young people, and there are far too many people who have been ready to suggest that he was able to do this through a good combination of natural charisma and good old-fashioned hard work. Speaking about and addressing the late Texas Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who is black, he said, again, this is the author just quoting him, it's very obvious to us you are not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I could not make it in on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. Again, this is someone who has a career because of a bunch of old white men gave him a lot of money. Because they gave him a lot of money. Whew. Let's see. Just checking in with the chat really quick to make sure everything's okay, that you're all good. we're having a nice time. We're having a nice day. You know, we're just hanging out together. We're reading together. It's this that makes it particularly galling to see him cast by someone as a free speech warrior. Here's where I get upset, and I'll be a little bit real. He created a professor watch list. People that I know, friends and former colleagues from academia, were put on watch list by this guy and his organization because they espoused views different than him, or they had courses where they taught left-wing fingers. I said fingers. They didn't teach left-wing fingers. They taught left-wing fingers because that's just a part of intellectual history, you know? I mean, this is someone who wanted to cancel, quite literally, anyone who espoused ideas that he did not agree with. And when I'm reading his quotes out now, and, you know, in Spears' article, I don't think what she's saying here is this person needs to be canceled, but it's like, if someone says stuff, that's the stuff that they said, and we can judge them and hold them accountable based on those things. You know, canceling someone because they believe something different than you is bad and kind of dumb. Holding someone to account for their words and actions is not, in my humble opinion. When we decline to speak ill of the dead, it's because we have compassion for the living. In this respect, I'm sorry for Kirk's children. One can say that. That is good. When asked about mass shootings, he said, and again, like, I don't know, man. It's this sucks that this happens to be a thing that he said, and he is a person who got shot. When asked about mass shootings, he said, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment. That's tough. Also, guys, Allie's trying to get it to 666 likes. Let's do it. That's tough. It's a tough opinion to have. And yeah, you know, and she talks about caring with children. And Spears says on that front, I'm fairly sure Kirk did not care about my child. My child lives in Brooklyn in a progressive family. His mother works and does not have a marriage where she is considered inferior to her husband, which is, again, a thing Charlie Kirk believed, that women were inferior to men. And in a marriage, it was the role of a woman to submit to her husband. It says they live in a Haitian immigrant neighborhood. And if you listen to Charlie, you might be under the impression that my neighbors eat pets. You'd also be encouraged to believe that simply by the virtue of being non-white immigrants, they were replacing white people. And that since they were also black, they're dangerous. Happening all the time in urban America, he said, prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's tough. It's tough. That's tough. That's just a tough situation. Hold on one second. Boom. Listen. Stuff he actually said. I do not believe anyone should be murdered because of their views, but this is because I don't believe people should be murdered generally. Some of the people valorizing Kirk insist that all of his toxicity was acceptable because at least he was open to debate. You know, but his actions undercut that notion. His entire business was saying the other side was evil and dehumanizing them. The debates were simply performances, and he could not have an entertaining public fight without opposition. Turning Point did not work to bring people together. It worked to bring about a country where anyone who wasn't a white Christian nationalist wasn't welcome. I won't celebrate his death, but I'm not obligated to celebrate his life either. I think that is fair. I won't celebrate his death, but I'm not obligated to celebrate his life either. This is an article, once again, this is from Elizabeth Spears in The Nation. It's called Charlie Kirk's Legacy Deserves No Mourning. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now so you all can check that out. And I definitely hope that writer stays safe. But, you know, reading that to say that I think she makes some good points there. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. One second, just checking some things on my end. Let's see. All right, cool. But yeah, and the point of this truly isn't to say or it's not like to celebrate someone's death. I have no interest in celebrating someone's death. I don't think Elizabeth Spears in that piece in The Nation was celebrating anyone's death. But it is making me feel, as just a person, I'm just one guy, my name is Michael. Nice to meet you if we haven't met before. It's making me feel pretty crazy, feel pretty insane, feel pretty cuckoo bananas, Cocoa Puffs, whatever, that I live in a country where if you do not celebrate the life of an avowed white nationalist, that you are bad or you don't like free speech or that you should be punished. I don't like that I live in a country where the state and prominent organizations in the state are memorializing this person. I think that there has to be middle ground between being overly callous about the loss of life and whitewashing one's legacy to celebrate someone that said heinous things about marginalized people. Because again, the guy said anti-Semitic stuff. The guy said anti-Black stuff. The guy said horrific things about trans people. You know, we know in the Jubilee debate that our buddy Naima was on, he said with a straight face that if a 10-year-old daughter was RAPED and was impregnated, that he would force her to have the child. That's the person that we're talking about, you know? But I would say the thing that has come out since his death that, for me at least, has been the most cathartic and important thing that I have read is the Ta-Nehisi Coates piece that came out yesterday in Vanity Fair. I assume many of us are familiar with Ta-Nehisi Coates, a incredible author. I think his most famous book is probably Between the World and Me. And the thing that's really cool about Ta-Nehisi Coates is that he is a public intellectual that embodies a curious and open spirit in as much as he has changed his mind. You know, Ta-Nehisi Coates over the year has developed his thinking in new ways, in different ways. On his most recent book, and I'm forgetting the name of it right now, had a really stunning essay on his experience of traveling to Palestine. If you've seen this before, we'll talk about it. If you've not read this article, I do recommend it. It's one of those ones where, hypothetically, if you don't subscribe to Vanity Fair, you have to find another way to read it, but you're all smart, so you can do it. You're smart people. Let's make this bigger, and I'll check to see if it looks okay on the screen because I want everyone to have a nice time and see the thing together. Before he was killed last week, Charlie Kirk left a helpful compendium of words, one that would greatly aid those who sought to understand his legacy and import. It's somewhat difficult to match these words with the manner in which Kirk is presently being mentioned in mainstream discourse. New York Times columnist Ezra Klein dubbed Kirk one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion, and a man who is practicing politics in exactly the right way. This is the problem, right? When someone like an Ezra Klein, who I've talked about before in the context of abundance stuff, looks at Charlie Kirk's style of showing up on college campuses and yelling at 19-year-olds and saying, like, this is politics in exactly the right way, I fundamentally disagree. There's a lot of other examples I'll give you, but I'll give you one example real quick. Look at what friend of the program, Kat Bugazale, is doing with her congressional campaign in Illinois. She put out a video today asking for some funds. If you have money to give her, I'd consider doing it. But Kat is using the money that she's raising for her campaign to do projects that serve the community in which she is running. She's directly benefiting people. For me as a person, this is one man named Michael Burns' opinion. I think that a better way to do politics than the Charlie Kirk model is a model in which your political actions aim at directly serving the material needs of communities. That's just my opinion. What do I know? I'm just some dummy. Gavin Newsom hailed his passion and commitment to debate. He asked us to engage with each other across ideology. Atlantic writer Sally Jenkins said he argued with civility and said his death was a significant loss for those who believe engagements can help bridge disagreements. I would love to see an example of him engaging in such a way that it bridged disagreements. If there is one, I mean this very genuinely. I would love to see it. The mentions of debate and engagement are references to Kirk's campus tours during which he visited various colleges to take on whoever may come. That this aspect of Kirk's work would be so attractive to writers and politicians is understandable. There is, after all, a pervasive worry among the political class that college students ensconced in their own bubbles could use a bit of shock therapy from a man unconcerned with preferred pronouns, trigger warnings, and the humanity of Palestinians. If you are a writer, Ta-Nehisi Coates is great. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a good writer. The way that he hits that last sentence right there, wow, 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 wow. Wow, 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 wow. That's all I got to say. But it also shows how the political class's obsession with universities blinds it to everything else. And the everything else of Kirk's politics amounted to little more than a loathing of those whose mere existence provoked his ire. It's not just, for instance, that Kirk held disagreeable views. He was pro-life. He believed in public executions and rejected separation of church and state. Claims of his civility, this is Coates, are tough to square with his penchant for demeaning members of the LGBTQ plus community as freaks and referring to trans people with the slur. I don't even want to say that word, TRANNY. I highlight it. It feels gross to say. And he said that at people, and he said it at trans people. Faced with the prospect of a Kamala Harris presidency, he told his audience that the threat had to be avenged because she would kidnap your child via the trans agenda. That's a thing. Remember when Kamala Harris was running and she said, if you vote for me, I will kidnap your child with the trans agenda. You know who's actually kidnapped children? The other guy. The other guy has kidnapped some kids via ICE agents who are PUSSIES, if I spelled that right. He was a master of folding seemingly discordant bigotries into each other, as when he defined the American way of life as marriage, home ownership, and child rearing, free of the lesbian, gay, transgender garbage in their school. Cool. Awesome. Adding that he did not want kids to have to hear the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day. Oh, you hate Muslim people? We've gathered that. The American way of life was Christendom, he claimed. And Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America. Another thing that Kirk and people on his team, because all this boring team stuff we're really into, is this idea that there is some cabal of so it's the Marxist leftist using Islam funded by the Jews. If I'm getting this right, if I'm putting all the threads together right, the Marxist materialist using the sword of Islam with money from the Jews. It sounds great. Super cool. Super cool. Super cool. Let's see. Someone get mad at me. Matthew Roder in the chat said, civility, aka hypernormalization. Yes. I can't believe I've avoided talking about Adam Curtis thus far. And there is a thing we will end on today's program that I think is a very, I guess I would say a very like Adam Curtis-y moment, a very Adam Curtis-y point to end things on. So we'll get there when we get there, but we're not going to get there right now. Okay, back to the Coates article. He asserted that New York mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani was a Mohammedan, and he said he wants to see that anyone trying to see Mohammedism taking over the West would love to have New York a prior Anglo center. Bro, if you're out here saying stuff like a prior Anglo center, if you are saying words out of your mouth like an Anglo center, a place for the Anglos, like we know what you're saying. We know. He habitually rallied against black crime. Like those are his last words, claiming that prowling blacks go around and fund to target white people. He repeated the rape accusations against Yusef Salam, a member of the exonerated Central Park Five, who is now a New York City councilman, calling him a disgusting pig who gotten away with gang rape. Let's just be clear. If you don't know the history here, 5 black teenagers in New York were convicted of a crime that all evidence has proved they did not do. It was a traumatic experience for all of them. One of those people is a New York City councilman, and this is what he's having here. This is what's going on right here. Snicker Snack has brought up, would you consider playing Kamala Tale? It's like the election mixed with Undertale. Play it when you need a good laugh. I'll look into it. I've never heard of that before, but I will look it up. But again, this is just the sort of person we're talking about. And listen to his comments on Haiti. Like, it was a country infested with demonic voodoo whose migrants were raping your women and hunting you down at night. Language where black people are framed as like raping women, so you gotta like lynch them and stuff. This is a thing. We've had this in America. This isn't a new thing. We've had this thing in America. We've had this thing. This has been a thing. These Haitians are having a field day, per Kirk. They're coming for your daughter. The only hope was Donald Trump, who had to prevail, lest Haitians become your masters. Yeah, because that was happening. We all remember the time where all the Haitian gangs in America were coming for our daughters and our women with their voodoo power. Not that Haiti is an island that's been colonized and exploited by Europe in ways that many other places haven't. Not that the devastation of that place is tied to slavery and colonization in real ways. Not that that country still owes a debt to France. A debt for what? Oh, for slaves that self-emancipated. Cool. Sounds awesome. Yeah, this is great stuff. He was all about the anti-white agenda. He called the southern border the dumping ground of the planet. It was a magnet for rapists, thugs, murderers, fighting age males. I'm gonna say Charlie Kirk talked like someone who was like a slave master, or like someone who would like be at the auctions or something like that. They're coming from across the world, from China, from Russia, from Middle Eastern countries. They're coming in, and they're coming, and they're coming. Oh, and then Jewish donors. Yeah, the Jewish donors did it too. It's so boring how it always comes back to that for these. It always comes back to the Jews. Not great. His bigotry was not personal, but extended to the institution he founded, Turning Point USA. So Turning Point USA, an organization worth a lot of money. It's a big media company that has money and employees. Crystal Clanton, the group's former national field director, once texted, "I hate black people. Like, fuck them all. I hate blacks." End of story. First of all, blacks? That's what we're saying? One of the group's advisors, Rip McIntosh, once published a newsletter featuring an essay from a pseudonymous writer that said blacks have become socially incompatible with other races. Oh, cool. In 2022, after 3 black football players were killed in another college, Meg Miller, president of Turning Point's chapter at the University of Missouri, joked in a social media message, if they would have killed 4 more N-words, we would have had the whole week off. Cool organization. This is politics done right. This is how we got to do politics in America. Turning Point is an example of young people just doing the right thing. Just doing the right thing. Oh no, they're just little Nazis. He subscribed to some of the most disreputable and harmful beliefs the country's ever known. But Coates notes, it was still chilling to think that those beliefs would be silenced by a gunshot. The tragedy is personal. The tragedy is national. Political violence ends conversation and invites war. Its rejection is paramount to a functioning democracy and a free society. It's true. It's not great. Political violence, not great. The thing with political violence, so many people have said this week, so I'm sorry to be repetitive here, is like a lot of stuff is political violence. Like poverty is a form of political violence. You guys hear about, like ICE raids and the militarization of American cities, the militarization of police. That's all political violence. America's complicity with an ongoing genocide that's killing kids and leaving, innocent children as amputees. That is all political violence. America has a pretty high body count, guys. America is a very violent place. There's violence that is baked into the sort of blood of this nation. I've been thinking a lot about Paul Thomas Anderson this week as I get ready for his new movie. But think about the movie There Will Be Blood. If you guys haven't seen that movie, please watch that movie. When the character Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, says something like, there's a competition in me. Like, he embodies something about the spirit of America, which is fundamentally violent, which is fundamentally accumulationist, which is fundamentally individualist. And Paul Thomas Anderson got that, so made a movie about how that is the case. In 2022, when Kirk was frustrated by the presence of Leah Thomas on the University of Pennsylvania women's swim team, he said, so he didn't call for spirited discourse. He said that fathers should descend from the stands, forming a line in front of Leah Thomas and saying, hey, tough guy, you want to get in the pool? Because you're going to have to come through us. A thing I'll say now, and this is, I feel like I've been pretty composed. No, I'm going to drink your milkshake. I'm going to drink it up. Drink it up. I'm going to lose composure for a second here. This is very much, and I use this quote a lot, but Jay-Z has a line, I think it's the 99 Problems, where he says, you know, the type, loud as a motorbike, but wouldn't bust a grape in a food fight. The point of that lyric being, there are people that say things and like to posture as if they are a violent and aggressive person who, in an instance of real life violence, would pee their pants. And Charlie Kirk and many of the prominent right-wing figures are that person. This is someone who, after Paul Pelosi was like beat half to death with a hammer, said that we should praise that guy as a hero or whatever. So when he says a bunch of dads should go fight a trans college woman, I mean, A, Jesus Christ, but B, and I say this as someone who most of my job is just sitting in chairs, talking and writing and reading. Like he was a guy that just sat around and talked all day. He wasn't tough. Wasn't like a tough guy. It's not like he was like a MMA fighter turned media correspondent. You know, it's just, yeah. I'll stop because I'll cross a line soon. Weeks before his death, he said, "We're taking our country back from these cockroaches." Hey, you guys ever seen Hotel Rwanda? Yeah, calling people cockroaches, pretty big connection between that and political violence. Also, English people are being totally normal about this, as this article shows. Picture Tommy Robinson, who's like an English Nazi. The English are using this to be weird as hell. And Coates says a lot in this that I think is really important. So it says, what are we to make of a man who called for the execution of the American president and then was executed himself? What are we to make of an NFL that on one hand encourages us to end racism and on the other urges us to commemorate an unreconstructed white supremacist? And what are the writers, the thinkers, and the pundits who cannot separate the great crime of Kirk's death from the malignancy of his public life? Can they truly be so ignorant to the words of a man they've so rushed to memorialize? I don't know, but the most telling detail in Klein's column was that for all his praise, there was not a single word in the piece from Kirk himself. Again, I think a lot of people in like the liberal discourse, I think a lot of people who are probably well-intentioned turned on the news and they didn't know who this guy was. And they heard that some guy who was like a news host on the right got killed. And then they saw that some people on the left were saying mean stuff. And they were like, oh, that's horrible. Because in the reporting on his passing, they used a bunch of superlatives to talk about him. What they didn't use is his own words. You know? They didn't show a lot of clips. Didn't show a lot of quotes after he died. And I think it's worth noting, as Ta-Nehisi Coates points out in this piece, that in the Ezra Klein New York Times feature talking about how he was good, he didn't quote him. He didn't give an example of him doing this stuff. Also, guys, I know in the chat people are trying to get to 666 on the likes, so maybe just do it. It's a nice thing to do. Why not? Why not? More than a century ago, this country ignored the explicit words of men who sought to raise an empire of slavery. It subsequently transformed those men into gallant knights who sought only to preserve their beloved Camelot. Coates here is talking about the fact that the United States of America is a country founded in racial violence, and many of the very people who were a part of constructing that racial violence in a nation based around that racial violence and dehumanization are people that we put on monuments and statues, and we say that they're so good, they're so good, they're so great. Also, by the way, we got to take any mention of slavery down from the parks. Did you guys hear about this one? I think a couple days ago, Trump, it's a thing. I think in Georgia, there's some parks where the national parks they have to take down anything that acknowledges the existence of slavery or things of that nature happening in those places because it's a bad vibe and they don't like it. There was a fatigue in certain quarters with Reconstruction and a desire for reunion to make America great again. Coates goes on to say, words, and this is the end of the piece, words are not violence, nor are they powerless. Burying the truth of the Confederacy, rewriting its aims and ideas, and ignoring its animating words allowed for the terrorization of the black population, the imposition of apartheid, and the destruction of democracy. The rewriting and the ignoring were done not just by Confederates, but also by putative allies for whom the reduction of black people to serfdom was an unfortunate price of white unity. The import of his history has never been clearer than in this moment, when the hard question must be asked: if you would look away from the words of Charlie Kirk, from what else would you look away? I think that leaves us with something important here, guys, because if we're actually trying to build a world that isn't fertile soil for white supremacy, if we're trying to build a world that doesn't have really good conditions for white nationalism, for racism, for hatred against marginalized groups, if we're trying to build a world that has a sense of equality to it, you know, did people like unlike it and then it went away? Okay. And if you've not read Coates's work before, I definitely recommend it. Here, I'll share a link to this one, although I might be sharing a link that goes to archive where you can maybe see it even if you didn't pay for it. Hold on. Okay. With all this, I'm just kind of left with that thought. The thought of, what does it mean to be living in a nation where we have normalized so many things? Like, we have normalized the fact, again, you can't make this shit up, that right after Charlie Kirk got shot, there was a school shooting in Colorado last week, and it didn't really get much media attention. That we've been witnessing on our screens every day an ongoing genocide in Gaza supported by this country. That we've seen public figures and representatives normalize hate speech against all types of marginalized people and create a country where people don't feel safe unless they look the right way or say the right things. This shit just sucks. You know, I'm not saying everyone has to be a Marxist super soldier here, but I wish the vibe was better than that. And what we have to be wary of right now is how this moment is being and will continue to be weaponized. And I think one reaction to the fear of that weaponization is to be like Ezra Klein or Gavin Newsom and find excuses for why this person was actually good or why this is important. No. But the important thing is to clearly articulate what the issue is here. Because if all we have is the Ezra Kleins of the world saying, like, actually he's good and here's why, and then some edgelords online making meme jokes about his death, I'm not affirming or condoning that, it's a thing that exists, it doesn't leave a clear articulation of why many are so uncomfortable with the posthumous valorization of Kirk. And I will say again, I made a video that came out on Friday that had a section about Charlie Kirk in it. And the section about Charlie Kirk called him a white nationalist and a coward. And I didn't take it out of the video because his death did not change that. I did put a note in the video saying that this was made before he died. I did not want to come across as seeming callous. But when you die, it doesn't erase what you did and said in every moment up until your death. And I think in articulating why we don't like this stuff, Charlie Kirk, in this one example, left us with all the tools we need, which are his words. And I think whether it's a parent or a friend or someone in your life who's like, hey man, I saw that you posted something about, I don't know, he was like kind of a good guy, blah, blah, blah. You know, he gave you his words and you can use his words. I'm not saying you need to weaponize his words here, but to just say like, hey man, this is what that guy stood for. You know, we could say that he stood for faith or debate, but he didn't. He stood for this stuff. Stood for talking about Haitians this way and Black women this way and Jewish donors this way and Muslims this way. And a lot of it was incoherent and a lot of it was grounded in hatred and a lot of it was serving the long-term project of turning America into a white Christian ethno state. And sadly, that's what a lot of people who have been mourning the past week, what they also want, a white Christian ethno state, which would not be fun. I know some people are asking in the chat for the links to previous articles. I'm going to post the Spears one again and the Coates one I posted a second ago. I think I have lost the link on my end, but it was from Vanity Fair and it came out yesterday. Let me see if I can find one thing that I want us to watch before we go and before Lux comes on. Let's see, where's the best quality of this thing that I can find? Hold on. Okay, I guess I'll have to do it here. Hold on one second. Wait, why won't it let me start this over? Sorry, I'm gonna reload something and then we'll talk. Okay. I don't know if you guys have seen this one yet. I don't know if you have. But I would say this is the most consummative text of the last week. This is a Mormon influencer who was at the event, who made this video and put it on TikTok during things. It's your boy. Oh no, it's no audio? Dang it. Let me see if I can make it work. Let's see. Hold on. I'm so sorry that you guys have missed this one. Let me see if I can find another version of this. TikToker apologizes. Apology video. I don't want to see his apology video. Show us the real thing. Is it on YouTube? Sorry that I'm having to go through this right now, but I do it for you because I care about you. And I think this is a nice moment. Okay, here's some reactions. I don't want reactions. Just give me the clip. Just give me the friggin' clip. Give me the video that I need, internet. Okay, I'm going to try using this one. I love that the way this video went around was by someone saying it's the most Connor O'Malley thing that they have ever seen. Let me make sure my screen sharing has audio on it. Okay, guys, this one should hopefully work. Let's see. Is there no audio again? I hate my life. I hate everything. I'm going to try again. Because a thing I've learned in life is never give up, never surrender. And you know what I mean? Like, I will see you guys in Valhalla if we need to. Okay, so also share tab audio. Here we go. We're going to try this one more time. And if it doesn't work, there will be consequences, is all I'm saying. Okay, I'll try this one more time.
It's your boy on TikTok. There was just a gunshot at Charlie Kirk. We're in Utah. There's a gunfire. This is not a joke. Hey, let's go. It's your boy Elder TikTok. There was just a gunfire in Utah. This is not a drill. There is a gunfire in Utah. Shots fired here in Utah. This is not a joke. Charlie Kirk, Elder TikTok, Mormon Central, Utah.
Mormon
there was
Central.
a gun that just fired off here at Charlie Kirk. I am not playing with y'all. Hey, make sure you go to church on Sunday. Read the Book of Mormon. This is not a drill. I'm not playing with y'all. Hey, Jesus is Lord. Jesus will protect you. Jesus is your savior, bro. I'm not even lying. Make sure you subscribe to Elder TikTok on Instagram.
So the reason I wanted to show you guys this is because it's insane, and he basically does like Connor O'Malley stuff. Does some Connor O'Malley stuff right there. Someone said, "Why are we watching this?" Because I think it just shows the absurdity of the moment we're living in. That when that went down, someone took it as an opportunity to do social media stuff. As Lauren said in the chat right now, we are too unserious, and the notion of someone being in an active shooting environment and stopping to be like, "It's your boy, Elder TikTok, Mormon Central, follow me on Instagram," like, and then that guy went and then stole some of the merchandise that was like covered in blood on the table as well. Yeah, like Dave in the chat. I'm just like, that's what's happened to our brains, guys. I'm not even mad at Elder TikTok. Our brains have changed in such a way that is a normal response. I just watched a person get murdered, and I'm like, "Hey, it's your boy, and we're out here. We're out here." Christ, guys, I'm going to bring my friend and colleague Michael Luxembourg onto the show now. Lux has some thoughts on all of this stuff. Lux has thoughts on lots of things. He's a thoughtful human being. Give me 1 second, Lux, as I move some things around. He should be here now.
It's me looking crazy.
Yeah, well, you tend to be a crazy looking guy. For those of you who don't know Lux, many of you probably do. Michael Luxembourg is a bit of an everything guy. He works with me on this channel. He is on Techno Poverty a lot. He does fight opera. He does live comedy in Austin. He does a bazillion things. But today, he wants to spit some truth about. And guys, for those of you who don't think I'm doing like debate or whatever, this is the response. He said he wanted to come here and defend Charlie Kirk. So go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think everyone has the right to having an opinion. And if Charlie Kirk's death is the cost of having an opinion culture,
wow,
then that's what he would have wanted. And I think everyone is, sad that it happened, but pretty happy it happened like that, because that's sort of exactly kind of what he would have sort of been looking for.
Okay, now get serious. What's your take?
I don't give a shit that this guy died. He's a dork. Who cares? But like the way that it's like maximized the emphasis of the sort of death of consensus reality is so messed up.
And by death of consensus reality, just to be clear, so everyone gets what you're talking about, I mean, you're basically saying like it signifies a situation or a world where people are basically getting to make up what happened and getting to make up the consequences of what happened to facilitate their worldviews without like referring to reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's that there's no agreed upon sense of things that have literally happened.
Mm-hmm.
That there's people, like, for instance, everyone, like, I mean, I'm sure you talked about the Ezra Klein stuff and all the things where people are saying what a great guy Charlie Kirk was, and I encourage debate, and how they're just simply not quoting anything he said, and how they're just describing a guy who has nothing to do with the person who actually existed, right? He didn't encourage debate. He encouraged public yelling at children, and framed it that way. He had extremely violent and disastrous politics that have led to tons of deaths, both directly and indirectly. He was a nightmare of a person. He was a bad person who did a bunch of bad things. And people are describing him in ways that are totally distinct from his own actual reality. And then at the same time, we are seeing the investigation just be people on both sides just sort of saying things and coming to conclusions that are baseless in terms of the evidence that we have available, or if not baseless, are like insanely speculative. And saying these things are like hardlined, we know X, we know Y. I think I just talked to a friend about this, and I was like, the line between what I believe and I know have collapsed into the same idea. And that's a huge problem, because you know things based on empirical fact, based on reality, based on, I got to figure out how to get this. Let me try moving over a little bit because the sunlight, there we go, it's better. The sunlight in this room is crazy. But we know things based on empirical reality, empirical fact, things that literally happened. We believe things based on vibes, on preconceived notions, on the way in which we narrativize and connect events internally. And that gap, those things being collapsed into one thing, means that there's no real, like, it's impossible to communicate in that world, right? Like, you can't have a conversation that engages with, in good faith, the other side of a conversation if there's no shared basis of stuff we kind of know about.
Yeah, I think the level of this that really exemplified for me what you're talking about is like, I think we've all gotten used to, and someone earlier in the show in the chat was talking about Adam Curtis and hypernormalization, which of course is always like a frame of reference here. But we've seen a lot of this construction of reality that happens in really malicious ways under, in Trump's America. And of course, to say that, liberals and whatever do this too. But one of the things that I found the most shocking with this is when people started getting fired from jobs for saying the stuff he said. So I talked about this a bit last week, or maybe I didn't. But one of the first firings was Matthew Dowd on MSNBC, who, when everyone was sort of fluffing Kirk the day he passed, just said, like, this is someone who used hate speech. This is someone who advocated for violence against marginalized groups, and we should just be careful about what we're saying. And, dude got fired. That felt crazy. Then the Washington Post writer who just quoted Charlie Kirk, and then supposedly when she got fired, one of the reasons was like hate speech against whites or something. It's just kind of, it really highlights what you're saying, because if you can't literally point to a thing and be like, no, but the guy said it. It's like people are getting punished for just saying what the guy said.
Right, because that doesn't cohere with the beliefs about the guy or the performed beliefs about the guy.
No.
And there's no distinction in value between belief and fact. Also, speaking of facts, we're over 1K viewers, which I believe still means Raw Dome.
That was at the old job. Now I do what I want.
Oh, well, I'm not wearing a hat today, so you guys get mine instead. Yeah. You get what Rory Blank described as a Dominican monk who got really into the Sex Pistols.
I know everything about that.
But yeah, so there's this total collapse in value of belief versus truth, or belief versus empirical knowability, I guess, because truth is a more complicated thing. But that distinction is fostering a framework in which politics aren't based on anything outside of just strict, pre-existing ideological commitments.
And that's like the scary thing. And it's even a thing we see between like and when I say right and left here, I mean that in the context of American electoral politics, but the liberal left clinging to some assemblage of like truth, decency, common sense, like all of these old-timey folk things, kind of trying to play the old game And I was kind of saying earlier on the program, it seems like it's a great time, not for the manipulation of facts and reality, but for the offering of a compelling counter narrative. And I think a lot of people, again, this is like the Mondami effect. Like, there is room now to offer a counter narrative that is more compelling than the sort of naturalized version of liberalism that we've been sold. But I don't think that like trying to undercut what you're describing with like facts and logic is going to get anywhere, because they just don't care. And I think that's the thing. We've seen this throughout the Trump administration. Like, we all had, and I'm sure many of you watching did this too, when the clip came out and he was like, "Oh, grab him by the pussy," we were all just like, that's over, because our brains couldn't conceive that we lived in a new reality where it just didn't matter, because A, people didn't care, B, no one wanted to let that go anywhere from there. So I just think it's just weird, because you can't really, I guess I just wonder, and I was thinking about this a little bit because I watched that Eminem guy, Kyle Kalinske
Yeah, Kyle
Kalinske on Doom Scroll yesterday, and his whole thing was kind of like, you just got to be like those guys, like, because there's kind of no truth or no coherent political narrative, you got to come at the Trump guys like a Trump guy. I don't like that one so much, but wondering, if you have thoughts on what, because I think some people could hear what we're talking about and maybe think, oh, so we're just fucked. That sucks.
No, I mean, I think you can engage in narrative construction, and there's maybe more leeway to kind of fudge it where you have to than ever before. But I do think part of what makes the Mamdani effect real, right? And shouts out to the homies Charlie and Donald on the Mamdani campaign. Love my friends. They're so
Hell yeah.
so great. We love them. Donald, the former owner of My Camera, incredible. What a magical world we live in. But I've talked to them about this, about how they do their narrative, how they do this like narrative stuff, how they build a Mamdani thing. And the fact is that like it's true, right? Like, Mamdani's operating from perspectives that are based in reality. People can't afford stuff. It's hard to live in New York. The fucking state and city governments have been fucking over the city for years, right? Like, all of this is true, right? And so the part of why it's overcoming the force of sort of the fictionalized narrative surrounding Costa, Mamdani, etc., is that people can look at the things that he's saying and say, oh yeah, that's right. The problem is that with a lot of national politics, a lot of people don't see the things that people are talking about.
Screw
right?
it. People are asking, I'll give it to them.
They were saying they'd give you money for it.
I don't want money. This is free.
Hell yeah. Respect. Let's go. Baldadarity. So the difference, right, is if you live in Fredericksburg, Texas,
yeah,
and you don't go to the city, then the myths about what a city is can be just as compelling as the positive narratives about what a city is. And so then it's just a question of which prior ideological commitment do you hold in terms of how you process that information. And then a lot of times those are conservative ideological pre-commitments. I mean, even liberal, even leftist leaning media, right? Like, for instance, obviously Beau is Afraid is making a joke about this, but Beau is Afraid portrays the city as a terrifying place, and it's supposed to be a joke, but it's a joke because that's the cultural vision of what a city is, right? And so if you're already operating with that, and then Donald Trump shows up and is like, the fucking cities are full of gangsters and rapists, and they're going to kill you and rape you and take your money, then you believe it. And that's harder to compete against nationally than it is locally. And that's why the Mamdani effect is really effective and real in New York, but less so nationally. And that's where this sort of deconstructed cultural reality becomes increasingly difficult to reckon with.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, I know today, and I don't know anything about it, so I don't want to say too much, but I did see that someone who I think is like a sort of democratic socialist politician in Wisconsin or Milwaukee announced that she's running for mayor of the state
Francine
today.
Hong, baby, you know she's running for governor.
Oh, governor, sorry. In like a Mamdani-esque way in terms of things, and I think that, you know, when we've seen the ability of politicians at the local and state level to create compelling narratives around this sort of stuff. We kind of just need to see that on a larger scale. And I think what we also need is, and that's why I found, you know, the two articles I focused on today were the Catherine Spears piece from The Nation and the Ta-Nehisi Coates piece from Vanity Fair. But even as folks in the public discourse who are speaking about stuff in a measured but honest way, and not like speaking truth to power, but just talking about stuff in a way that, like, I don't know, uses normal and non-hyperbolic language to describe what's going on.
Well, yeah, and I think you have to be clear and explicit that way. And I think, to Sean Harriman's point in the chat, the oyster farmer from Maine is really good about this.
Mm-hmm.
That he refuses to sort of accept the that guy rocked, by the way. His intro video in the New Republic article about him, Graham Palter, I think his name is, rock. But there's this refusal to accept the sort of generally consensus built framing of economics and reality. And so when Francesca Hong, that's right, thank you. When you get a guy like Gavin Newsom, for instance, I know someone mentioned in the chat, they're doing this like performative pushback thing, and that's great, sort of, but there's not a vision of reality that's opposed to what the conservatives are putting forth, right? What Mamdani, what Palter, what Hong are doing is trying to put forward an alternate narrative of reality, and that's sort of what we need from like national Democrats and everyone is to be like, what's actually happening in the world is XYZ, and it can be, and the problem is when you say that, then you have to follow that logic with, it's a Moby Dick mural, and what happens is when you say that, you have to follow that with, well, if those things are true, then what do we do about those things? Problem is, what we do about those things are ooga booga socialism. Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me think of, so folks, I don't want to give too much away, but not the next video that's coming out, but the next kind of longer video that Lux has helped me work on, because Lux helps work on everything on this channel. We talk about some bad guys, some bad right-wing billionaire guys, but a point that kind of came up in reading and thinking about this is how some of the bad guys end up being more critical of the emptiness of neoliberalism than figures on the quote-unquote left. And how in one sense, it means that a certain type of centrist politician, we can think about the Schumers, the Pelosi's, the Hakeem Jeffries or whatever of the world, don't really have a good counter narrative to that. The positive thing about it, and we talked about this via the Politico article on the polling that happened recently on this, is it does make people like Zoran and Bernie and AOC, et cetera, more compelling, because they are to an extent able to articulate a vision that starts from the same point of critique. Like, yeah, this whole recent thing does suck, but this is how we solve it. This is how we make life better, not this way.
Right. And it's the fear of what actions would be required and what they would have to endorse that prevents them from declaring that narrative, or that narrative of reality, right? Mm-hmm. If you were to say huge tech companies and huge tech companies and conglomerates and media functions and a corrupt government and all this stuff is milking money out of the lower and middle classes to an upper class and creating frameworks of legal impunity and worker immiseration in order to consolidate power and oppress a bunch of people, then the answer is to stop that. And the things we do to stop that are like, taxes, regulation, social services, building incentives, etc. And like Chuck Schumer hates that shit. Nancy Pelosi hates that shit. Hakeem Jeffries hates that shit. And so that's the problem, right? And so for the far right people who are talking about, they can say all this shit is bad. The problem is that the wrong evil guys are in charge of it, and it's also because of racism. Or it's also because of black people, and we're racist rather. And don't clip that if you can't avoid it. And so then they have that compelling position, but like the Democrats refuse to make that initial claim because they're scared of what it implies. And because of that, then once you're past that point, like you're trapped. And once they're trapped like this, they can get outflanked on everything. Right. Union protections go a huge way, and union formations. Like they can get outflanked on every question because they can't characterize reality as it is. Right. This is why right now, Trump is sending the National Guard into cities. There are ICE agents. Like, I have to send messages to a secret group thread sometimes about when I see ICE agents in Austin. Like, this is happening all across the country. They are doing extrajudicial murders of criminals. They are not of criminals. Extrajudicial murders of people who they think might potentially be criminals. Cutting a bunch of rural hospital funding, making people jump through hoops to get it back. All this shit. And Chuck Schumer is like, we refuse to shut down the government unless we're not going to shut down the government unless they refuse to play ball with us by creating 1 year of tax credits. Right? They just won't, and Hakeem Jeffries too. They just simply won't engage with the idea that there's a greater demand at play.
Well,
and
yeah,
the
and I think
crisis transcends their politics.
Yeah, I think what we've seen in those folks is like one side grasps at crumbs while the other says, "Fuck you, I'm taking the whole dinner."
Yeah,
and it's worked. And I think it's not only has it worked, but people are attracted to that. There's a sense in which politically people have been attracted to leaders who are like, "Fuck it, we're gonna get it," and not leaders who are like, "Actually, you're not allowed to have stuff. I'm sorry, but you can have a little bit." Like, right. People don't want that anymore.
I would even push that metaphor further. It's like one side says we're taking the whole dinner, and the other side says, "Sorry, there is no dinner, just crumbs. We got as much as we can get." They won't even acknowledge
that there is a dinner to be had.
Yeah, there is a dinner to be had. Bogdan Andon in the chat has been talking about necropolitics a bunch in the chat, and I think that's a good book to think about right now because we have really entered this phase where the government is built around selecting which populations get to live and which ones get to die, and engaging in like the final phase of like the Foucault quote of power is exercised at the level of populations, right? And they finally sort of gotten to that point, and instead of there being pushback on the very conceit that we need populations to die in order to justify the national project, Democrats are like, okay, but let's like negotiate who those guys are, right? Instead of taking a moral stance that maybe engaging in a sort of self-destructive process of elimination and saying that that's bad flat out from the jump, they're like, okay, we'll concede that part, but we should negotiate the details, which is crazy.
Yeah, I like that someone in the chat said, "Lux is slowly slipping out of frame, mirroring my mental state in reality."
I know. I was fidgeting so much that I pushed the pillow I'm leaning on, and it started to slide.
No, I love it. But I think with all this and the stuff that's like, it's only going to for a bit now get weirder and worse. We're only going to see more of this sort of weird backpedaling on free speech where like the whole thing was free speech, but now it's the not free speech because there's hate speech, and hate speech is anything that we don't like. I mean, these guys are going to take it to the limit as much as they can. And like you said earlier, when we don't have any sort of consensus reality to point to as an objective state of reference, it's very easy to do this sort of thing. And, it matters that some of us say stuff and do stuff, but it matters very little. We're going to have to kind of, in a way more pragmatic way, hope that there's some people in this country with positions of leadership and influence who at least push back a little bit. And I even think the one politician, and I know it always comes back to the big boy of the Midwest with me, but in the days after Kirk was shot, the one high profile Democratic figure I saw say something kind of dope was JB Pritzker, who was like, hey, this sucks. But also, if we want to talk rhetoric around political violence, those guys are doing that thing. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah. I mean, we love the great Khan of the Midwest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's some truth that, right? What is the phrase? I think it's like fascist projects depend on semantic collapse. They depend on the loss of meaning, such that meaning can be imposed basically exclusively through force, right? And we can get Derrida and Foucault about this and say that that's always the case, and to some degree it is. Whatever, we don't have to post-structuralize this right now, or we can if you want to. But
no, I gotta go eat lunch and I'm getting dizzy.
Yeah, so we don't have to get into all of that. But there is a fundamental project where the destruction of meaning and of communication and of the ability to share a reality that we can discuss together rather than one that is determined from above by force is a core part of the fascist project, because then they get to deploy force against to determine what the future looks like, what the world kind of looks like. And that's what they want to do, and that's what they're doing. And so I think a part of our project as people, as people of conscience and people of principle, is to continually push back on that process, is to make sure that there is still meaning to stuff, there is still politics that we can engage in, and still projects that we can do if we want to make the world not as much of a fucking tragicomic mess as it is. That is still accessible to some degree, and the more ground that gets ceded by politicians, by whoever on these questions, the worse it's going to get. But that ground isn't inevitable. It's not ceded inevitably, right?
Yeah.
It's not. There's no reason to seed it in advance.
Yeah, I do want to say I agree with that. Also, people are throwing around time stuff in the chat. It's 2:20, guys. I ate lunch late on Wednesdays because I've realized streaming at this time, there's no good time to eat lunch. So that's why I tend to, have a snack, go from 12 to 2. But Lux, I think you tied a lot of threads together, and I really appreciate that. And I think for folks who have been hanging out the whole show, it probably feels like you just finished them off in the nicest way possible.
I come here to finish off my friends.
Yeah. So, friends, thanks for hanging out today. Of course, thanks to Lux for joining. And I genuinely mean this. Great chat today. It can be weird when talking about stuff like this for things to not go cuckoo bananas insane. So I appreciate that we've all had a relatively normal time discussing this stuff. I do recommend checking out the Catherine Spears piece. I do recommend checking out Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece. And I recommend in general, just kind of to second some of what Lux was saying, find some meaning, encourage meaning and truth in your own life. And, we only have another week and a half until Paul Thomas Anderson is going to save us all with his new masterwork.
I'm so excited for that movie.
We just got to get to there. And then my whole personality for the rest of this year is going to be just guy who likes to watch one battle after another.
Can I plug one thing before I go?
Plug one thing. Yes.
Tonight at 7:00 Central, 5:00 Pacific, 8:00 Mountain, or 8:00 Eastern, and at 6:00 Mountain, for the sake of equality, you should go to twitch.tv/Fight Opera, because Henry and I are teching out our first ever rerun of a show. We're going to be playing back our first ever show, Plantasmagoria. And if you guys like leftist stuff and art and cool anti-establishment politics and DIY creations, you'll enjoy this stupid wrestling show. And we're going to be airing it with commentary from some of the wrestlers, from me and Henry, from some of our comedian friends. And so if you want to support, it's called Plantasmagoria, not Phantasmagoria. Plantasmagoria. It was at a plant store. But if you want to support local artists and local art from anti-establishment people of all kinds of backgrounds, go to twitch.tv/fight opera. Burns, if you want to I can DM you the link really quick.
Yeah, and I'll throw the
in the chat.
Yeah, and I'll throw the link, guys. I'll put it up on my socials today. I'm online all the time, and when I see Lux and Henry post it, I'll repost it. So
yeah, but check it out. It's our first time doing it. It would be really help. We're trying to get our stuff to affiliate status before the next live show, so that we don't so that we can actually make money on the stream, because we put a lot of work into the stream.
We like it.
And Henry in particular, do it for Henry. Henry turns his ass inside out for that show, and deserves all the love on earth. So do it for Henry.
And also shout out to Henry, and gives me a way to wrap this up. Shout out to Henry, who's been doing the edits on the cuts from the stream that are over on the Sideburns channel. So remember, segments from the show go up over on that channel every week if you just want to check those out, if you don't have it in you to hang for this whole thing. If you are not able to watch this live and you want to watch the whole stream because you're a sicko, I respect that. Sign up for the free Patreon, because on the free Patreon, you get a link to the unlisted full stream. And I really mean it. It's free. You don't have to pay for anything. The other advantage I would say of the free Patreon is I let you know, with some exceptions like today, every time a video comes out, every time I stream, you'll just get an email and a link to the thing, because YouTube doesn't often show people stuff. Guys, have a great one. Do something positive this week in your community. Do something positive for yourself. You're allowed to jerk off if that's something you're into. Just find a way to do it that doesn't involve anything too exploitative. Eat some snacks. Have a nice time. And remember, I go live every Wednesday at 12 p.m. West Coast time. Shout out to Lux. Shout out to all of you. And we'll see you guys next time.
Goodbye, everyone.